has anybody gone out and like attempted to sort of unwind or pull on the thread of any of the names that were working in the staff? Like I would imagine there's got to be like NDAs, but the guy's dead. And unless there's some, like, why wouldn't you, even if you got paid off, which I would imagine they all got paid quite well, you would imagine that one of them would speak unless they were afraid of like there being some other way of being some other mechanism to punish them for speaking out about it.
Yeah, there have been some limited sort of reporting of people who work with him, security people, assistants, people who worked on staff at his mansion. It has not been very substantive. Some of them have passed away, like, natural causes, I guess. But, it's been what I'd call kind of a limited hangout a little bit. The term people may know that intelligence term. There've been like a little bit of reporting about all these things, but the thread has never fully unraveled the whole way. And it's not always clear how much any one individual may have known about this situation. But I do think, Emma raised a really important point, like the actual, to take the one aspect of sex trafficking that Ghislaine was involved in, there are people who knew about that, and there are people in the staff who testified that they cleaned up at his mansion after these, abuses took place and so forth. Again, I don't know how Epstein learned how to do that, or decide to integrate that into his larger apparatus. One thing that does go back to Robert Maxwell, and beyond that is the ties to BCCI, because that bank, BCCI, which was this notorious global money laundering institution, they were very well known for sex trafficking, and they would traffic girls from Asia and South Asia to the Middle East, and that was part of their money laundering apparatus. It seemed like there's a class of people all around the world who were involved in this type of activity, whom Robert Maxwell was an integral part. And then by some means, it seems, though, that Epstein inherited, and this would just be a natural thing that they knew to do, or they knew that their clients, whoever they were, would demand this, or political expediency would demand this. And he just sort of was able to fulfill that role, given who he was and whose connections were and so forth. So, it's interesting because there are people who talk about this, and a lot of this stuff is public, and we are getting some disclosures about this. There's our reporting, there's a House Oversight Committee, his victims of sex trafficking have testified, members of the staff has testified in the past, but it doesn't really, the whole thing does never get put together. Even these emails that are coming out right now, they're really interesting, but they're all like what individual, shotgun-like blasts in different directions, and the whole thing is not really put together in a cohesive whole. They're really shocking, like, implications in many of these emails, and shocking implications of things people have said in the past too. But what does it all add up to? That's the question which has not really been fully answered.
What from the email trove of Ehud Barak was the most shocking to you? I mean, was it a series of stuff like where you're like, oh my God, wait, what? And like, it feels like that could have been like a rolling experience of like, how is Epstein, like, dealing with the Russians in Syria, and then also going to, Mongolia, and like, it's just bizarre. But what did you find most sort of surprising or shocking?
Well, it's interesting because the emails are all there, and like anyone can look at them, but it's not obvious what are being said in the emails per se, because this is like a snapshot of a particular time in both men's lives. It doesn't account for when they first met. It doesn't account for, it's like you're joining the story mid-conversation in a way in a lot of these cases. So it's only really after putting together the thread of what they're talking about each of these cases that, you come to some revelation that something very significant was happening here. So it takes a lot of time to look at them to actually determine that. It's definitely doable. It's just, it's an investment of resources and so forth, which I guess is a barrier to just reporting them easily. It's not like low-hanging fruit per se, even though they are available. But, I think it's fascinating, the casualness of all this, actually, in a way, because, one would think that back-channel diplomatic conversations were handled through some sort of quasi-official channels and so forth. It was really often just certain individuals who were very plugged in, who were part of these elites organically, who arranged these talks, which Epstein was doing for Barack in many, many parts of the world. But I think that it's not shocking, but the most revealing email in there is one we've quoted several times in the story. And I think we'll continue quoting because it kind of tells the whole story in a way. It's one where Epstein just emails Barack out of the blue, seemingly. They just chatted very often with their friends. And he said, all over the world, in Somalia and Syria and Ukraine and all these places, there are this great upheaval, and people in power are very insecure and afraid. Isn't this perfect for you? And Barack responds, yes, but it's not easy to turn it into a cash flow, something for us to discuss on Saturday. So it seemed like the two of them were looking at the map of the world. Epstein had contacts pretty much everywhere, saying who's insecure, who needs help that we can provide them or sell them, and then using Barack as the guy who go do the pitch with Epstein encouragement. So I think that email sort of is distilling the broader little operation they were running in this case. They were exploiting global upheaval as a means of making money, and then also furthering security interests of certain states, and particularly in this case, Israel.
It's hard because this stuff really sort of pulls at that thing in your brain where you just want to go to like the most sort of like conspiratorial thing. But the way I saw that email, I mean, it's in your pieces, obviously, but it really feels to me like that is Epstein trying to get him on the hook. Like the idea of like, there's a lot of opportunity out there for you, buddy. And Barack is like, yeah, I know, but I can't make it happen. It sort of feels like that's Epstein's way of saying, well, I can help you make it happen. And then, there's this and this and this. And,
And Barack, we should say, it's heavily implied in Virginia Giuffre's, I believe, accounts that he might have been the prime minister that assaulted her. That's accurate, right?
Yeah, there's nothing about that in the emails per se, but I have seen that reporting, and I did see her statements about that. She said a certain prime minister did that. I think the New York Post heavily implied it was him. I don't have any definitive information about that, but yeah.
But just to say how woven, like all these financial dynamics are with the sex trafficking too. Sorry,
I would imagine like that's part of it. It's like we're in this, dude. Like we go hang out. We go to the strip club together on a regular basis, and us doing business. That type of like sort of dynamic where it's like we're all in on this. And it does him emailing Barack out of the blue and saying there's a lot of opportunity out there seems solicitous to me in some way.
Yeah. So this is 2014. So they'd already known each other and been close for some years now, and they'd already done the deal or initiated the deal with Mongolia and Cote d'Ivoire, at least at this point, and other countries as well too. So they, to Emma's point, it's a really important point because all these communications, they don't talk about the sex trafficking aspect at all, so far as I've seen. But that's a subtext. We know what's happening. We know what's been going on. He'd been involved in that. He'd been convicted many, many years before that, the first time for that. So it's something which is an unspoken sort of additional layer in this onion that, it does implicate the broader, suggests, a broader meaning behind their communications. And, Epstein, if you look at the way he talks to different people, he talks to everyone sort of in a different way, so to speak. He kind of tells them not what they want to hear per se, but he would sort of project a certain image back at them, which was conducive to what their interests were, their desires were, and so forth. He definitely has a markedly different communication style with different types of people. So, it makes sense that in Barack's case, he helped make Barack a very wealthy person. And I think these emails show the whole process of that happening in a way. And, Barack, he had certain political inclinations, he had desire to make money, he had other things going on maybe. And his communication with Epstein seems to evince a knowledge of all that and how to continue to get him along that process.
Lastly, did it occur to you, like reading these emails, like what is this dude doing using Gmail for all this? Like it's sort of like, that's the other thing. It's like they're doing all this over like CompuServe or AOL. It just seems so like Epstein feels like he doesn't have to worry about anybody finding this stuff out because there's almost a sense of like, who are they going to report me to? Like,
Yeah.
I got like I'm untouchable. It sort of feels like
Well, that was the lesson he also got out of 2007 non-prosecution agreement, was like just basically I am untouchable, right? That would make sense and line up with this timeline, right?
Yeah, I think there was a great sense of impunity reigning at that time. Not to say that they wanted anyone to read his emails or thought maybe it was not impossible, but given the 2008 agreement, given a lot of things, and given the way he lived and the people around him lived, I don't think that they felt necessarily a great fear from the public or fear from accountability of any sort. So it's not just him who was using the Gmail, like Barack was using the Gmail, and other very powerful people, Americans and others, were using like AOL and Hotmail and so forth. This is 2014, 13, around that time, and these people from an older generation who may have been less acclimated at that time to the whole concept and so forth. But it was very cavalier. And I think if you look at the later communications, especially the House disclosures, which are more recent in time, 2019, 2018, like that, he does seem to become a bit more cagey. And he says more often that certain things should only be discussed on the phone and so forth. But he's still using his Gmail. He's still using that to communicate with these very powerful people. So, that's a
and we
very,
should say
very...
this is after, like, it's not like, like Petraeus got, I think he was, I don't know if he was convicted, but he was prosecuted because, they found that he was doing that draft thing with the Gmail where I think it was his girlfriend / reporter who was writing about him. They would communicate by just sharing a Gmail account and writing back and forth just in drafts. So it was never actually even emailed out. And they still were able to find that. So it's not like, it's not like my dad going like, wait, what? They can look at AOL emails? Really? Like, the guy has some savvy. It's just as if he just thinks he has impunity on some level.
I think that sense of impunity kind of goes to, it's like a very important part of the whole story, because even the sex trafficking and the criminality and so forth, not just Epstein, but a lot of these people, they seem to believe that they were somehow above all sort of legality and morality and propriety and so forth. That's just the broader impression I get from their broader range of activities. Like even the use of an island and all the spectacularly illegal and immoral things that are going on there. It just seemed like there's no way that anybody could possibly see what we're doing or stop us, or the idea of us being stopped is simply impossible. That's just a tremendous amount of hubris, I would say, which is in the emails, not just with Epstein, by the way, many, many other people. And when you get that level of hubris, you can make mistakes and you can become cavalier in a way which could be injurious later on. That's what they seem to be operating as, though. And I would say that I get the impression that that culture still exists. And maybe Epstein was taken down for some reason, but that broader global elite culture, and you see it like all over the world, that's very, very much prevalent. And, this is just one glimpse into it. And who knows what's going on right now.
I think at the end of the day, that is probably like the biggest takeaway from this is the sort of, there is a cohort of people living amongst us, but they're not living amongst us. They are operating under an entirely different set of rules. And it explains a lot of times their decision making, because I think, more than anything else, at least in the context of the sex trafficking, these are not people who I think even contemplated the idea that like, well, I'm doing sex trafficking. I mean, I think they were aware that they could break laws. And there's some emails from Epstein that suggest, Dershowitz was getting information to see like what the specific laws were, but they clearly didn't look at these girls or women as, as human beings. They were just, these are all, and I think that across the board, it's like, we're humans and everything else is just sort of like things for us to exploit in some fashion. Murtaza Hussain, we will link to your pieces on DropSite.
Great work.
And look forward to more of these coming out. It is, there's so much to this story. And again, I think it really speaks to sort of a an elite perspective on the world that we as just mere humans don't know much about it. But appreciate your time today.
Hey, thank you both for having me on. Appreciate
Thanks
it.
so much.
Hey, folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.